At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
All right, welcome to the show today, the Author Brand Show. You're going to want to take notes, especially with our guest today. He's got some wisdom and experience that is very interesting stuff. He's actually the publisher. Publisher of the company. The name of the company is Illusion One. ALLUSION1.com. Check it out. We'll talk about what he's doing, which is not your traditional business type books. He does graphic novels. Really cool stuff. He also has experience in the media, being a journalist in the media for over 5 years. So welcome to the show, my good friend, Tyler Connor. Tyler, how are you today?
Hey, Doug, thank you so much for having me on.
You bet. Glad to have you on. So you have a wide range of stuff here, from publishing, graphic novels, and media. Where did you get your start?
Yeah, so initially when I got into the news publishing industry, I was writing an article for this local newspaper. Like I'm out in Southern California, so in one of the suburb cities, there was this local newspaper that had probably a publication of, I don't know, maybe 3,500 prints per month. And I wrote the front page article, and that kind of got me into the industry. And then probably about in 2019, I started to kind of put together this idea of wanting to actually produce news media. And in 2020, during the pandemic, which was a horrible time to launch anything, I launched this newspaper and this digital newspaper. And since then, I've just grown my audience, and I've primarily focused on kind of underreported news topics and a lot of financial stuff and some scientific and medical things that maybe aren't necessarily out there as much as what you'd see on like mainstream media. It's not like anything controversial, but it's just things that are just kind of underreported. Yeah. And then over the past year or so, I know a few people in the YouTube space, and I was just surprised to hear how many people in the YouTube space that have these audiences have these graphic novels or comic books or even books that they've written. And I started talking to this YouTube friend of mine that has a fairly large audience. And I talked to him about the idea of maybe starting a publishing company together. Yeah. And basically since then, I finished this one graphic novel. It's not even a graphic novel. It's more like a comic strip. Okay. And I just released it. And so I'm kind of getting more into the creative content publishing space in addition to the news media space.
That is a wide range there, my friend. We've got news and comic strips. So have you always been involved in the comics as like for fun as a young man, and then you did it for a business, or is that new?
No, I mean that's fairly new. I actually I think it was because of grad school. I never really read much for fun because I read so much. Like I read just so many news articles a day, access so many news articles a day that it kind of becomes cumbersome somewhat to, all right, let me pick up a book and let me spend time on this too. Sometimes I just want to rest my eyes.
Right.
But I've always kind of had a little bit of a creative bend to myself. But well, it's the part of the problem with that is that I actually have no artistic talent. Like I have ideas, but I can't draw at all. I can't graphic design anything. I'm very limited in that space. So I have to kind of be dependent upon other people. So I've found illustrators and artists and things like that to work with me. But it is kind of a departure. And I feel like, in the news media space, I mean, even if you're publishing something that's underreported, like for example, today there was something about how the feds are thinking about potentially cutting interest rates
next year.
Next year. And even something like that, it's that's not really, it's not a blood and gore type of a story, but on the same token, it's not, there's only so much you could take of that where it's so, I don't know, I wouldn't say dehumanizing, but it's just so creatively like bankrupt in so many ways. And then, you read the other stuff about how, there's this war going on, that war going on, this thing happened in Africa. And I mean, I'm very much interested in those topics, but it's, I feel like at least working on something creative like this story that I worked on, it's kind of more of an outlet to get things out
Uh-huh.
there than, just, well, yeah, here's another article about this.
Yeah, yeah. It's your outlet for some positivity, not just creativity, but something you can it's not so depressing perhaps because the news is pretty depressing, right?
Oh yeah, there's nothing in the news that's really pleasant. Everything will kill you, everything is killing you, and everything's falling apart.
That's right.
That's
That's a bleeds it leads. We know why that is, right? People just
yeah.
gravitate toward that stuff, and so we got to appeal to the lower base desires, I suppose. So but the back to the graphic novel or the cartoon, also I'll call it cartoon. Um, you create the stories, but you hire illustrators to do the cartoon part, right? The art, the drawing.
Yeah, so I mean, I
Yeah.
came up with the main concept. It's called Dugas and Allen. I created the concept and essentially what the characters would be doing and how they would look.
Mhm.
But I actually got connected to an illustrator who's really good. He's from Brazil.
Uh-huh.
He was the one that actually brought these characters to life, and
Oh, nice.
he created a lot of the situational things that happen.
Mhm.
And I feel like in some ways I like having I like it not all just being on one person, because I feel like oftentimes in that space, at least from what I've learned and when I've spoken to people,
Mhm.
it's kind of incumbent upon one person to do kind of like everything, or at least in terms of creating the story, creating the script, and then
Mm.
also doing the designs. And just from what I've experienced or just talking to other people and just learning more about the industry, sometimes that could be difficult to be able to execute all three really well. I mean, there's obviously people that can do all three very well,
Mhm.
but I've seen some very good art, and I've spoken to a number of illustrators in the graphic space and comic book
Right.
space, and they have some great art. But oftentimes, kind of what they're actually like the subject matter,
Mhm.
or when it comes to creativity standpoint with originality, um, sometimes it could be very limited because
Mhm.
they have these visions in mind, but sometimes
Yeah.
like working with new stuff can sometimes be for some of them can be somewhat like challenging. For example, even the artist that I was working with before he started doing the
Uh-huh.
illustration for this story, Dukas and Allen, he was doing a lot of like parody things. Like he
Mm.
did a parody, it was kind of like a cat parody of the Matrix. So it was like
Okay.
a guy that kind of looked like Neo, but he was like a fat cat kind of a guy.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I mean, for me, I mean, I kind of have, these ideas or,
Yeah.
narrative ideas, but it's just trying to find the right person. Then there's just a long process of just going
Yeah.
back and forth and thinking about it. I mean, I'd be interested to learn more about like when it actually comes to like the novel space that,
Right.
who helps people organize their ideas for an actual
Yeah.
novel.
Yeah. Plot lines and character development is I don't know how people can hold it all in their head. Rewatching Game of Thrones recently, I'm like, how many different characters are coming and going, and these plot lines? How can they have it all in their head from 5 or 10 years of stuff going on? But they do. I've got one other writer friend of mine who wrote science fiction series, and this
Hmm.
guy is a physicist. He created his own language for this
Oh my
for this
gosh.
science fiction world. So it's pretty extensive. So tell me more about the characters in your. I'm sorry, it's not calling it graphic novel. You're calling it a cartoon strip, a cartoon book. Is it a is it a comic book? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, so it's in a book format right now. I mean, it's basically this first book is a combination of, I'm calling them like longer episodes. So
Okay.
there's two longer episodes that have more of a narrative. And then the rest of the pages in it are just a collection of basically comic strips
Okay.
that are, like one off, self contained, different like situational things that are
Yeah.
happening. But
Sure.
with these two characters, with Dukas and Allen in the story in general, it has the look of a 1920s, 30s animation look, like
Oh,
the
cool. Yeah.
Fleischer Bros and early Walt Disney stuff.
Sure.
And basically, with the two of them, the character Dukas is kind of more of it's kind of like a troublemaker. Somewhat, he's not a bad person per se,
Uh-huh.
but he kind of has that like maybe like early Bart Simpson kind of vibe to him, where he's just
Okay.
kind of like a stinker doing things. But
Mm-hmm.
in every installment, there's basically his plan fails or something goes awry,
Mm-hmm.
and basically his best friend Alan, who's like the co-lead of the story,
Hmm.
he's kind of more of a neurotic kind of worry wart kind of person that's always
Yeah.
trying to like reel in the friend Dukas.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like in these various installments too, there's a lot of like surrealism going on.
Hmm.
These two characters, even their designs, they kind of have that old look of they have like body types that are very similar to like a Mickey Mouse, where it's kind
Okay.
of this black form with some shorts and shoes.
Four
And
fingers.
yeah, exactly. And the character of Dukas, he basically has like a two cherries as a head, and Alan has like a Greek column for a head. And
Hmm.
yeah, they're just kind of always getting into some kind of shenanigan and
Okay.
something
These
weird
aren't
situation.
cats in Matrix. These are human beings.
Uh, I mean, they're humanoids. They're
Humanoids.
definitely humanoids, but in this story, there's it's very surrealist. So there's a lot
Okay.
of there's dogs that are the size of people, but there's also people in it. But there's ghosts, and
Okay.
there's one character that just has a donut head, but that same kind of body. Like
Yeah.
it's a very non-serious type story. It's
Right.
just meant for
Okay. And just to get it clear on what it is, like, so I know in a graphic novel, it's a longer story, and a comic book is generally a short form. You called it a long form. Is it like mostly cartoons and a little bit of like bubbles of talking, or is it actual prose in a manuscript? How's it look in the book?
But there's not really prose, and I mean
Mhm.
there is like speech bubbles above when they
Right.
talk,
Okay.
but there's not a lot of like exposition, like exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
Where
Got it. Right.
I mean, with Illusion One, there's other stories that we
Hmm.
have in the works that are going to be more narrative driven.
Okay.
This one is more, I would say, it's more equivalent to something like like a Garfield or something
Got
like
it.
that, where it's just kind of because even like with Garfield, there's shorter little strips where it's three little panels, and
Hmm.
Garfield, is whatever. He's stealing a plate of lasagna from the
Right.
neighbor or something like that. But then
Hmm.
there's also the longer narratives where they go trick or treating, and that's
Yeah.
a 30-page kind of like a short story kind of a thing.
Okay.
So with Duke's Now, it's kind of the same thing where I have these two episodes. The first one I think is 11 pages, and the second one's like 17 pages.
Okay.
And then all the rest of it is just these, yeah, one off one page strips.
Okay. So it is like a comic book size then. Is that right?
Oh yeah. No,
Okay.
it's 50 pages in total, so it's not like a huge
Yeah.
book, but
Okay.
even for the 50, it took quite a bit longer than I think
Yeah.
people might think.
Okay. All right. So it's you did this for to pressure relief valve from the news media cycle. That makes sense to me. What else was driving you besides that? You could have picked up tennis, but you decided to do this, comic thing. So what else is about you that said this is where I want to go? I want to create these stories and hire a designer and whatnot.
I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I've kind of had a creative
Hmm.
side of my brain for a
Yeah.
while.
Okay.
And then I think it basically just came to fruition where with my news media, in any given week, I can have, like 150,000 people can access my stuff in
Yeah.
any given week, especially on the digital side of it.
Hmm.
And it just kind of occurred to me, yeah, it was about 2 years ago, almost exactly.
Yeah.
I published a newspaper, and I just had this thought. I'm like, a lot of newspapers, they have these little comic strips,
Yeah.
and why don't I make my own? So that was kind of the genesis of the idea 2 years
Ah,
ago when I
got
started
it.
doing that. And then a
Yeah.
year ago when I was talking to that YouTube friend of mine,
Hmm.
um, it just really kind of dawned on me. I'm like, oh, there really are a lot of people out there that have audiences,
Yeah.
and they have like fandom, so to speak,
Hmm.
but they might not know the whole publishing aspect of things or the whole business aspect of things. And obviously I'm learning the creative publishing aspect of it. But at
Hmm.
least when it comes to printing traditional media like a newspaper, I mean, it kind of takes a while to learn that industry. Like you got to meet a guy who knows a guy, and
Hmm.
then I mean, it's funny out here. I'm not sure what it's like nationwide, but at least
Yeah.
out in LA, all these guys they're all old timers. They're all at least like 60 something years old. They've been
Right.
doing
Right.
it for 50 years almost.
Hmm.
And yeah, just getting connected to them. And it's so I figured, hey, like obviously creative publishing is different
Yeah.
than news media publishing. But I figured that there was things I can incorporate and I mean, I hope it's a success. I mean, like I said, the book just launched, so I mean,
Right.
I'm hopeful, and like I said, like I mentioned earlier, I mean, I have titles lined up
Mhm.
for next year,
Nice.
and then going to 2025, hopefully, I can actually start working with these different YouTubers
Mhm.
while also publishing my own stuff as well, and
Very cool.
yeah, hopefully, it can actually be something.
Yeah. So you have other stories in the works. What are the stories you have coming up that could tease the audience here?
Yeah, so I have a story I'm working on right now. It's actually going to be more of an actual book. It's not a comic book. It's called "They
Mhm.
Came from Planet Earth," and
Mhm.
it's basically the gist of the story is there's a president in a country, kind of like a second world country, like
Yeah.
maybe in Northern Asia or I guess like Western Asia, well, like a Turkmenistan, something like that.
Got it. Right.
Basically a president of a country like that. He's massively down in the polls for his reelection.
Yeah.
So as kind of a Hail Mary, he fakes this alien encounter to basically get everyone's mind off of what's going on in his country and onto this alien invasion thing.
I thought
Yeah,
you said you don't like talking about the news in your comic stuff. I mean, come on.
yeah. Well, I mean, the story like this, yeah. I mean, I feel like I could see something. I mean, at this
Yeah.
point now, no news story would shock me. So if something with aliens
Sure.
happened with a world leader, I wouldn't be shocked. But I've
Yeah.
been working on that, and I think that's it's supposed to be kind of a. I'm not sure how much I like the term dramedy, but it's going to be kind of a dramedy, and this, yeah, it's going to be like political satire in it as
Got it.
well.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's one thing I'm working on, and then there's
Nice.
another graphic novel I'm working on called "Dreams of Idle Beauty," which
Mhm.
is basically it's kind of like a noir type story that involves. It's kind of like a noir story. It's kind of also like an episode of the Twilight Zone,
Mm.
and it's
Okay.
basically about this girl who moves to LA, who essentially sells part of her emotions to have this operation that'll make her more beautiful. And
Wow.
then the rest of the story revolves around like the investigation of that story or the
Mhm.
investigation of the disappearance of this girl. Cause after she has all these operations, she ends up disappearing. And yeah, so for that story,
Very
for both
cool.
of them, I mean, I'm still actively writing them, but
Yeah.
uh yeah, hopefully they'll both be out. Especially, well, I'm thinking probably late summer, maybe
Okay.
like fall. I definitely want
Yeah.
they came from Planet Earth to come out before the election because
Yeah, that'll help. Be nice. Yeah.
yeah, because it's such a political story. But
Right. Right.
so
Very
yeah,
cool.
that's some of the stuff I'm working on, and
I love it. I love it. That's great. So,
thank you.
your website is illusion1.com. That's illusion with an ALLUSIONONE.com. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So check that out to get, you already have some books there, right? The first one you mentioned the
Yeah, yeah.
name.
The first book is there, and it's available for purchase.
Okay, great. Great. And that is, do you put those on Amazon as well, or you just focus on your own publishing for those?
No, I'm also going to put on Amazon.
Mhm.
I'm actually today before we started talking, just jumping through all the hoops of getting on Amazon. I can't believe the amount of information Amazon wants from you to sell on their website. It's I mean, they're one step away from asking for a blood sample. And
Well, they
if
got to be able to, send those checks somewhere. They got to validate, make sure you're a real person. You got a bank account and all that. It's. Mhm.
yeah, I mean that's true. I mean, I did the phone the facial recognition thing with them today or whatever when you have
Yeah.
to like show your face and
Mhm.
yeah, I was surprised by that, but yeah, I mean, hopefully
I
I'll be
haven't
on
seen that.
Amazon and
Haven't seen that one yet. That's new for me.
yeah, the
Facial
last
recognition part.
yeah, well, they want you to like verify your identity with your license, so you either have
Oh,
to call in.
that might be a new thing with the AI because a lot of people are trying to publish these AI generated books. They're like, it's not going so well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was reading some
Yeah.
like Reddit threads about that, and
Mhm.
everyone seems to hate it. I mean, it's you already have to show your license anyways, but with
Yeah.
this, it's I think it seems to me like that's part of the cost. If you want to do things online and make money
Yeah.
online, then there has to be one of
Listen,
the sacrifices is a little bit of privacy, I
they
suppose.
know everything already anyway. I kind of gave up. I tried to use a different
Yeah.
browser a couple years ago, after the Google thing, and I tried to go, I'm like, you know what? They got everything already.
Well,
So,
yeah, and
yeah.
even that other browser that was popular for a while, that DuckDuckGo, it
Duck,
turns
duck.
out they were feeding all the same information
Oh
anyway,
yeah,
so
I had this one company, and I can name them. That was unroll.me, where
Oh,
it would
okay.
unsubscribe you from all the things that we forgot to subscribe to, and your email gets filled up. You go to the site and you can click on these buttons, and it unsubscribes you in mass from all the crap that you signed up for. I'm like, oh, this is great. So I did that a few years ago, and then the same thing, they got busted for selling the data. So we're like, I'm trying to unsubscribe you, and they're selling my data again. I'm like, oh, you guys, just give it a rest.
No, you can't. Yeah, it's impossible.
Yeah,
And I mean,
yeah,
once you're already on all those sites where it's your name and your phone number,
yeah.
all that stuff, it's
Until you get a homestead in the woods, you're gonna have to just get in the system, I guess. I don't know. There's no way around it, I don't think anymore. So
you also have to be born off the grid too. Not only do you have to get off the grid, you have to be
yeah,
born off the
right.
grid.
Yeah, or change my name and my my identity. Right, that would be one idea, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, great. So what else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to promote besides your book?
Um, I mean that was kind of the main thing. I mean,
Great.
I think I
Yeah.
mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago that yeah, I mean if you're working with other authors or anything like that that are looking for a place to promote their books,
Yeah.
I do have this digital newspaper. It goes out to an audience of 400,000 email addresses
Wow, that's
a
great.
week.
Yeah.
So yeah, if anybody's interested in that, they can reach out to me or they can reach out to you, and then you can
How
have
do they
them
reach out to
contact
you,
me.
Tyler? What's the an email or something we can put in there or what?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can send to you, or yeah, or people can just contact ucastnews@gmail.com or news
Newcast,
at yeah, like the letter U, UCAST news.com.
ucastnews@gmail.com. Ucast
Yeah,
news.
ucastnews@gmail, or they can send it news@ucastnews.com. Either way.
Okay, got it. Okay, great. Well, that's very nice. I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in that. So that's a pretty good size circulation for
Yeah,
your
and I mean,
newspaper. Yeah.
it does seem hard. I mean, I can't envision somebody that unless they have some kind of connections or something like that in the publishing space. Like if
Yeah.
you're a person that just has a normal amount of Facebook friends and things
Yeah.
like that, a normal network where you have a normal job and you have
Hmm.
300 friends on Facebook,
Yeah.
I have to envision it's very difficult to actually have anything of like, I mean, to get your word out there
Oh,
is,
it's it's funny. You take a look at in the old days, it was like, wow, I'm on TV, and there's three channels, right? And then cable came
yeah,
out. Now there's 1,000 channels. So it's like, okay, anywhere. It dilutes the power of the medium, right? So the
yeah,
same thing is true for used to be like, oh, I have a blog. You're like a journalist. Now it's like there's a blog for every 7 people on the planet. So same thing on social media, right? I think there's 3 million Facebook profiles. It's anybody can be a journalist, anybody can be an author, and your job is to focus on a target audience and bring them into that. So yeah, you can't just broadcast it to the world because it's expensive and painful. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I have to envision, especially when you're talking about with the costs, and when people come to
Mhm.
you and they talk to you, and when you even interview them, or even just privately,
Mhm.
I have to imagine that's such a huge thing people experience is they've created a book
Yeah.
and they've maybe spent a ton of time on it, and they've like even if it's a really good book,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean the problem is okay, if you have a normal office job and then you've got the 200 friends on Facebook or whatever,
Mhm.
how do you get it to beyond that? Because even if you go to other places to advertise,
Yeah.
and
There's
sometimes in advertising, it's a little bit of
yeah.
a misnomer that I think some people think, oh, well, I advertise and I'll automatically get, purchases from
No.
it. And it's
Mm-mm.
it's really not. I think
Mm-mm.
like you mentioned earlier, there's such inundation of advertisements out there that it's really hard to actually be noticed. And the average person,
It's
they're
very
not gonna
difficult.
they're not gonna see a thing for the first time and then buy it. Like
Yeah.
it's
You
just
know,
not.
the key thing I've learned in marketing lately, and we've all know this. What I'm going to say sounds so obvious and trite,
Hmm,
but I'm going to back it up with some data to make it have more value. I was at a podcast movement. It's the largest
hmm,
convention for podcasters out there. There's 2 million at that time, 2 or 3 years ago, 2 million different podcasts out there. Same thing. So I'll be at a podcast like this one. I'm lost in 2 million different podcasts.
yeah.
But there's a data scientist there at the convention talking about how he's analyzed like the top 1,000 podcasts. He's got some general data from all 2 million. He's got a lot of data on who's growing, who's not, and why. And he had a really big buildup, like 5 minutes of building up to this thing he's going to say, because I've got the secret, guys. I can tell you exactly, without question, what the one key thing is to make your podcast, your book, your business just take off. And it's irrefutable. There's one trick.
Hmm.
You want to know what it is?
Money or being well connected?
Nope.
Oh,
Nope,
okay.
not true. Joe Rogan's never advertised his podcast.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I meant like having a lot of money so people can like open
He
doors for
got
you or
that
something.
yeah, but still, he didn't use the money to advertise. He just was a
No,
wealthy guy.
you're
It
right.
was creating good content.
Oh yeah.
And if you think about it, it's like, well, yeah, viral shares, people share things they like. Sure, movies advertise a movie, but most people go to a movie based on a recommendation from a friend or a family member. And the same thing is true for books. I remember when Gary Vaynerchuk's second book came out.
Hmm.
Cool cover, jab, 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 right hook. Nice cover. But I'd read his first book, wasn't interested in seeing the second one. I'm like, don't really care. But somebody else did a SlideShare presentation on it. And in that presentation, it got me interested. And I bought his book. So think about that. This is like a very famous guy. I've already a client. I bought his first book, had no interest in the second one, knew his name, right? And still wasn't going to buy that second book till someone else gave me a reason to.
Hmm.
So it was a viral share. It was a SlideShare deck, and there was no money exchange. It was just an idea.
Hmm.
So in terms of getting things moving out there, it's good content, and if there was a magical formula for making things go viral, it wouldn't work anymore because everyone would do it, and
Well, that's
not
true.
everything can be viral. But
No.
the premise of creating good, shareable, interesting content is the key. And then of course, longevity. You got to keep at it because nobody notices the first year or 10 years or, gosh, Moby Dick didn't get popular until after Herman Melville died. So
Oh, geez.
sorry, it's just the truth.
Yeah, no, that's
Anyway,
yeah.
but yeah, great having you on today. I really look forward to reading your, I'm gonna call it a comic book, but I love the two new ones coming out. Those are really cool topics. I like that Twilight Zone one. That's a really cool idea.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll send you a copy of this book too, like for free.
Thank you.
I'll send you the link to that and everything.
Great. So there we go. Tyler Connor, folks, from Illusion One. Check out his book and check out his newspaper if you want to advertise. Great place to do that. 400,000 subscribers.
Yeah, 400,000 email subscribers. And then I also have this physical print newspaper
Wow.
like component of it too. So like, yeah, I mean that's all like in Southern California area. But I mean, if you're selling a book or something like that, I guess it doesn't really matter if someone's in Detroit or Calabasas or whatever.
Right. Very good. All right, great. Well, I appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doug. Well, I'll talk to you later.
Okay, you got it. And that concludes another episode of the Author Your Brand Show. I'm your host, Doug Crowe. And don't forget, if you didn't take notes, just click below, right below here, your show notes and anything else you need to make your life better. Have a good one.